chiamando i clienti e quindi c'era un lettore.
Flaps about and then makes everything harder for everybody, you know? It's just fun, man. Like, come on, that's just...
The Beefeater's here.
My name is AJ. I am one of the 35 yeoman warders, the Beefeaters that live and work here in the Royal Palace, so welcome to my beautiful home. My friends, for the next 50 minutes I'm going to be your storyteller. Together we will tour parts of the tower where I will point out some of the more historical buildings and tell you a few stories. But before I begin, there are a couple of rules. My friends, are we ready for a little bit of audience participation? Yes. Good. Are we ready for a little bit of history?
Yes!
Nice. Are we ready for stories of death and execution?
Oh, yes!
Woo! Good.
Just not mine.
That's all I've got. There are no love stories here. But our story does begin way back in the year 1066 when William, the Duke of Normandy, who was better known as William the Conqueror. He defeated our Anglo-Saxon King Harold at the Battle of Hastings. William was then crowned King William I of England on Christmas Day of 1066, but he had to continue to fight his newly conquered subjects because we did not take too kindly to Norman domination. Are there any French people in our group this morning? Quiet now, aren't you? William was looking for somewhere to impress but scare the people of Londinion. He chose a site just inside the eastern city wall where once the old Roman fort had stood. It was here in the year 1078 he authorised the building of his first ever royal palace and fortress of its kind in England. Today we refer to that building as the White Tower. I can point, you can look, you will not see it. Our defences are doing the job very well. I promise we'll get a better view once we head inside. Over the next 200 years, each and every king and queen that came to live inside the royal palace would add to its defensive system. So the inner ballium, the inner defensive wall, was finished in the year 1220. This outer defensive wall was finished in the year 1280. But the best part of our defensive system is what we are studying, the moat. This was once filled with water. Twice a day, the River Thames would flow in and all the way around our moat, keeping it nice and clean. This system worked really well at first, until the drains of the city opened and down into our lovely clean moat came all the rubbish, the dead bodies and the excrement. Yes kids, human poo. Would travel down the streets and land in our lovely clean moat, but fear not, because the tidal flow system worked. It pushed all of that rubbish, the dead bodies and the poo, back out into the River Thames, where it would bob across the English Channel and land on the shores of France. Unfortunately, the wider drains of Shoreditch and Houndsditch then opened and our beautiful moat became London's largest cesspit, a human toilet. A source of disease to those who live nearby, more worryingly for the yeomen and the soldiers that lived here in the Tower Garrison. But fear not, my friends, this horrible situation only continued for a further 500 years. It was not until 1843 when the Constable of the Tower, the Duke of Wellington, got permission from Queen Victoria to have the moat drained. The Duke of Wellington filled the moat up with sand and shingle to the height that you see today, and he put it to great use as an exercise area and a parade ground for his soldiers here at the Tower Garrison. Now, I said earlier that this was the first ever Royal Palace and Fortress of its kind in England, because over the years the entire complex has been used for lots of different things. First and foremost, we have held the crown jewels here in some form since 1303. It was a citadel to command and defend the City of London. The Royal Mint were here, where all coins of the realm were designed and produced until 1810. And it was also the site of the first ever Royal Observatory. This is where we studied stars and planets from until it was moved in the 17th century on order of King Charles II to Greenwich. If you've had a wander around already, you may have noticed lots of statues of animals. To my left, just behind you here, you will notice the statues of the lions and the tigers, because that is where they were kept. We had here, my friends, what is known as a royal menagerie, a posh word for a zoo. Other kings and queens would send lavish gifts here to the royal family, but never jewellery. They would send exotic beasts and animals of the likes that we had never seen on these shores before. Not only did we have lions and tigers, we had panther, leopard, ostrich, snakes, peacocks. We even had a grizzly bear called Martin, and he could dance. True story. We even had an elephant, a beautiful, majestic animal, a gift from the King of France. Now, we had never seen an elephant on these shores in the 13th century, and we did not know how to look after one. But fear not, we treated our elephant like a member of the royal family. We fed our elephant on cake and wine and beer. He died. Happy. He did die. It's very sad. It's very sad. We even had a polar bear. We had a polar bear here. A gift from the King of Norway. And he was tied up at Traitor's Gate so he could go fishing in the River Thames. He died. There's a theme here. We weren't very good at looking after the animals. But that is not why the animals left the royal palace. We also had a large open enclosure full of monkeys. They're these very extraordinary animals, very intelligent. I'm a big fan of monkeys. The tower monkeys, however, were a lot like me. Not too keen on children either. I love kids. I do. Now, we had a large open enclosure, so for a few extra shillings you could pay to go into that enclosure and interact with these very intelligent animals. Unfortunately, a 7-year-old boy wandered into that open enclosure without any adult supervision. He was savaged to death by these exotic beasts. It was then declared by the Duke of Wellington, the royal palace is no place for these exotic beasts. So by 1836, the last of the animals were taken from here to Regent's Park. That's what we now know today as being London Zoo. But you're not here for those stories. You are here because this is the most famous prison complex in the world. Now, before we move off, we're just about to use our imagination for a few moments. My friends, if you turn and look behind you, just behind the trees, you'll notice a tall building with some statues inside. That building there, my friends, is called Trinity House. Directly in front of that building, across the road, behind the tree line, are the gardens of Trinity. Now, the area across the road does not belong to the Tower of London, but it does serve as a very useful landmark. Between the 14th and 18th centuries, much fear and anxiety was brought to the city when King Edward IV had a permanent scaffold erected in those gardens just for the block and the axe. Over the years, no less than 75 men of noble birth alone were taken into those gardens and executed with an axe. The first ever victim was Simon Sudbury. He was the Archbishop of Canterbury. The year 1381. He was dragged, kicking and screaming, out of the royal palace and into those gardens at the hands of peasants. He was then hacked to death with an axe, murdered. His crime? He dared introduce a poll tax to London, and that is what we know today as the 1381 Peasants' Revolt. Wow. 7 years went by before we saw the first legal execution. and that was a gentleman by the name of Sir Simon Burley. And by a remarkable coincidence, the last man to lose his head in those gardens in April 1747 was another Simon. Are there any Simons in our group this morning? Oh, I will find you. Okay. Simon Fraser was the Lord Lovat, an 80-year-old Scottish lord who had taken part in the failed Second Jacobite Rebellion, led by Bonnie Prince Charlie. So if we imagine a scene up there on a day of execution, because thousands of people will line Tower Hill and be in those gardens to witness the barbaric act of somebody losing their head for you and your family's entertainment. You would bring your children, your grandchildren, and a picnic to watch somebody have their head hacked off for your family entertainment. The prisoner is always escorted out of the royal palace by us, the yeoman warders. Halfway up Tower Hill, we would hand over that condemned man or woman to the sheriffs of London, who would then take their final paces into the gardens where the executioner would be waiting. By law of the king, the prisoner could stand upon the platform and address the crowd. If they could be heard above the boos and jeers and dodge the rotting fruit and vegetables that were always thrown at them. It was then unfortunate up to the prisoner to kneel down, make their peace with God before they rested their own neck on that solid block of oak. And if that was not scary enough, it was the prisoner who would give a word or signal for the executioner to strike. And strike he did, because the axe would come crashing down. Hopefully beheading the victim in just one stroke. Fear not, my friends, this is where fun for all the family begins. By law of the king, the executioner must bend down and pick up that severed, still bleeding head and hold it high in the air for everybody in the crowd to see it. The executioner will then turn to the crowd and proclaim, "Behold the head of a traitor! So die all traitors! God save the king!" Believe it or not, the crowd would let out a massive cheer. Well done. But it did not end there. That severed head is impaled onto a soldier's pike. The soldier's pike is carried through the streets of London towards London Bridge, which in those days was the only bridge across the River Thames. And the head was left there, displayed above the gateway entrance to the city as a reminder of a fate that awaited all would-be traitors and Simons. The headless body is taken down from the scaffold, placed into a little wooden handcart and wheeled back here, inside the royal palace, where that headless body is buried in a mass, unmarked traitor's grave, somewhere here, inside the Tower of London. Now in a few moments, my friends, we are going to embark on our adventure following that bloody trail inside the royal palace. But before we step off, I just want to point out a couple of things. In a moment, we're going to go back up the ramp and along the causeway. We're going to enter through the archway of the Byward Tower. We'll go through that archway, my friends. As you're walking through, look up. You will see the spikes of a portcullis, a Norman drop gate, one of two surviving gates we have left here. This drop gate dates from 1326, weighs approximately 1.5 ton, and is being held up by a rope. From 1326, I kid you not. So please don't stop under that archway looking up, going, "Oh, Jeff, take a photo." No, Jeff, don't take a photo, keep moving. As you go through, you'll also notice 3 circular holes drilled into the stonework above your heads. These are called murder holes. Every single tower within the royal palace are fitted with some form of murder hole. Should the enemy penetrate the battlements and surge through, they'll be met with soldiers defending our towers with hot oil, hot sand, hot tar being poured on top of you. And if that did not ruin your day, the soldiers will carry out some housekeeping and empty their poo buckets on you as well. You have been warned. Right, my friend.
series on Queen Elizabeth I. I can't remember who the main guy is. It's like the guy and his son. And muted out the things falling out. I have a lot of people
So they drop hot oil from there?
a lot of people in that.
In the middle of our defensive system. So the inner wall behind me was finished in the year 1220. It has 13 towers that surround the royal palace and the wall is 50 feet high. Behind you is part of the outer defensive wall that was finished in 1280. In some parts, this wall is 28 feet thick. The street that we're standing on, even today, is still called Mint Street, because this is where all coins of the realm were designed and produced until 8. Palace this morning, you came through the middle tower, a very grand entry point into a royal palace, but I am sad to say, my friends, not our VIP entrance, and I do apologise because you're all VIPs to me. It's true. We have literally just walked past the VIP entrance and not given it a second glance. If you just look behind you, you'll see an archway in the wall next door to the Beefeater gift shop. That archway, my friends, is the byward postern. We call it the Sally Port. That is the royal entrance. The gates in that archway are the original gates. They're over 700 years old. They lead out onto the wharf, where we have a set of steps that sit directly on the River Thames. Today, they are known as the King's Stairs. Royalty and nobility hated travelling through the packed streets of the city, so they would travel here on their very impressive barges. They would tie up at the King or Queen Stairs and gain access to the royal palace without any fuss. It was at that very archway where King Henry VIII waited very patiently for bride number 2, Anne Boleyn, the day before she was to be coronated our Queen. Now, Anne Boleyn came along the River Thames on the King's barge. Henry VIII had spared no expense. He decorated his barge in silks and colours of the likes the city had never seen before. It was a magnificent spectacle. It was wonderful. He even had commissioned a fire-breathing dragon to stand at the front of that barge and breathe out fire. How cool is that? That's amazing. And I've seen pictures of this and it looked fabulous. And in my mind, playing in the background was AC/DC. Now, Anne Boleyn climbed the stairs, crossed the bridge, came through that gateway. She was dressed in all of her silks, looking mighty fine. She sashayed her way through that arch. Henry VIII couldn't resist. He dropped to his knees, took Anne by her teeny tiny hand and declared, "My darling Anne, I will love you for the rest of your life." Rude, but true. It was just over 3 years later the Queen did come back to the royal palace. She never made it through the royal entrance. She came through Traitor's Gate, but I will be telling her story very soon. So he's a 4-star general. He's either just about to retire or has just retired. He gets to live in the King's house for 5 years and conduct any duties at the request of the crown. Even today, it's a very important home. Back in the day, this is where we held our more important prisoners. Now, it's split into 2 parts. If you do look up, you'll notice the lid that comes out. That's the first chamber, the top chamber, today known as the strong room. Then this lower chamber goes another 10 feet underground. It's a 30-foot cell of dark misery. This was the prison cell, the man for all seasons, the one-time Lord Chancellor of England during the reign of King Henry VIII, Sir Thomas More. Sir Thomas More was a prisoner here for refusing to accept King Henry VIII as the head of the new Church of England. At the same time, the exact same reason, Sir Thomas More's very good friend and confidant, John Fisher, the Bishop of Rochester, was being held upstairs. It is very, very simple. All you need to do is turn your back on the Catholics. Join me in my Church of England. You sign the oath of allegiance, I can marry Anne Boleyn, the King is happy, which ensures everybody is happy. Well, Sir Thomas More was very brave in his response. He stood proud in front of the King and declared, "Your Majesty, sire, I stand before you a broke, a weary man, and yes, I am the King's servant. However, I am God's firm." Well, that did not go down well at all. Henry was furious. So mad that right there and then he signed the death warrants for both of these gentlemen. Now, on separate occasions, in June and July of 1535, these men were led up onto Tower Hill for public humiliation and public execution. However, in the year 1935, both of these gentlemen were canonised as saints of the Roman Catholic faith. Be that as it may, both of these gentlemen still find their final resting place in a mass unmarked Water Lane. Now, we still stand in the middle of our defensive system, so we know for a fact the wall behind me was not finished until the year 1280. That meant the River Thames, she flowed all the way through here. Turning up behind you, you see the Thameslink brickwork. That is how high the tide could come up. In the year 1275, Dutch engineers came to the Royal Palace and they physically moved an entire riverbed system back. This outer defensive wall was finished by 1280. The wharf was then completed and the River Thames, she has sat there ever since. So we've got our cap for the Dutch, their amazing engineering ability. This roadway was then raised about 10 feet. That is why we now look down onto the most famous, or should I say, infamous gate in the world, Traitor's Gate. This was built on the order of King Edward III. He needed a safer and more useful entry point into the Royal Palace. He was absolutely sick to the back teeth, travelling through the packed, narrow streets of the city. Convoys were being attacked, stores were being stolen, but worst of all, his prisoners, his Scottish prisoners, they were being set free. Very clever man, decided to use the River Thames as a highway. So at high tide, boats could pass through these gates and unload their cargo right here in safety. Therefore, my American cousins, this gate was originally called Watergate. It's true. Its name was then changed to Traitors' Gate because it became a trade entrance. And then along came the Tudors. And it was during the Tudor period that the name was changed to Traitors' Gate, which is a high number of alleged traitors to enter this mighty fortress and those creating the gate. Amongst them were 4 Queens of England: Queen Anne Boleyn, Queen Catherine Howard, Lady Jane Grey, a 16-year-old child, the uncrowned Queen of only 9 days. These 3 ladies came here to the Royal Palace and they never left. All 3 found guilty of high treason, taken through the archway onto Tower Green, where they were executed, and then buried somewhere here in a mass unmarked Traitor's Grave. Now, I did say 4 Queens of England. We actually had a prisoner here as a young princess who later became one of our greatest monarchs today. If we look back down Water Lane on the right-hand side, we get a very clear view now of the Bell Tower. The upper chamber, the strong room, today is fitted with windows. That was the prison cell of a young Princess Elizabeth Tudor. She was a prisoner here on the orders of her half-sister Queen Mary Tudor. Mary had declared Elizabeth a traitor, saying she had taken part in the Sir Thomas White Rebellion against the Queen's plan to marry Philip of Spain. Now, eventually, the young Princess Elizabeth, she was set free, but not before her half-sister Queen Mary Tudor called her into the Queen's house, as it was known then, and told her in no uncertain terms, "My dearest sister, should you dare return to the boundary that is Londinian whilst I am the Queen of England, I will have your head." Oh, sassy pants herself. Now, Princess Elizabeth Tudor, she was banished to the Palace of Woodstock, and that stood in Oxfordshire. Lancashire, just near Blenheim. She remained there for just over 3 years until the death of Queen Mary Tudor. Having had no children, the line of succession fell to Elizabeth. She was brought here to prepare the Queen for her coronation. She left these gates with the crown building area where she headed to Westminster Abbey. The St. Edward's crown was placed upon her head, and she was then declared Queen Elizabeth I. She's the only monarch in our entire history to never step foot back inside this royal palace and fortress in her long reign of 45 years. And you really cannot blame her. Because not only was she a prisoner here, but this is where her own mother became a prisoner. Her own mother stood trial here on false charges, was executed on every single false charge brought against her, and then buried somewhere here in a mass unmarked traitor's grave. Queen Elizabeth I, her mother was absolutely Queen Anne Boleyn, so you can forgive her for not wanting to come back. Like my friends, make a gap so I can find my way through.
Tower Garden.
Já tady to vidím hodně dřevěné schody.
Inside the Royal Palace in the 20th century than we ever did during the Tudor period, because we shot 12 flags here in World War I and World War II. We would not be here, my friends, if it wasn't for that building behind you, the Great White Tower, also known as William's Norman Keep. Work began in 1078, took 20 years to finish under the direction of Gundulf of Beck. Not Gandalf the Grey. Get very excited when this wizard built inside London, then disappointed when I have to point out that it was not him, it was his brother, the Bishop of Rochester. Now, the tower stands at just over 92 feet tall. On each corner that you can see, there is a turret. There are 3 turrets that are square. The one that you can't see is on the northeast corner. That's a round turret, because that's where the Royal Observatory used to be. That's where we study stars and planets from. That building, my friends, is where all our kings and queens lived for nearly 500 years. You go in that building and take lots of photos. If you've not been in that building, you've not visited the Tower of London. It'll give you all the information on some of the bits and bobs that I've been talking about. The long building behind you, however, with the gold clock, is where we house the crown jewels. You'll also notice that there's 2 sentries posted outside from the Grenadier Guards. Real soldiers, real rifles here for your safety and for mine. These not your stupidity. Absolutely do take photos and videos of the encouraging men and women, but please do not cross any barriers to stand next to them. And please don't stand in front of our soldiers with your TikTok on, doing your stupid dances, trying to make them laugh. They will laugh at you because you look ridiculous. All we ask is you treat our soldiers with the same respect as soldiers in any other country you visit on your wonderful travels. Here to do a very important job, albeit very boring. But they do it with self-discipline and a lot of pride. So please do bear that in mind. Under the gold clock, notice a small queue. That queue is less than 5 minutes to get you inside the building where the crown jewels and royal regalia are held. As soon as you go through that doorway, this is where we tell you. Do not ask. We tell you to take your devices of the devil. Your mobile, your cell phones, any camera and video equipment, and put it away. There is no photography, no voice, no video recordings inside that building whatsoever. Those under the age of 25, I promise your heart will probably be too big. You do not physically have your cell phone in your hand. Put it in your pocket, put it away. We're in that building for less than half an hour. It's worth every minute. I go in that building twice a day because I am shallow. I love diamonds. That building is where I have personally found true love. True love to me is the Cullinan Wall. 550 by my husband. I will do better next time. There's some amazing buildings that surround us. However, any building that you see with a green door is actually where we live with our family. Not only do we live on the outer perimeter, but also on the inside. So any green door you see is where we live with our families. Except for the two homes behind you. The tall, dark building with the lantern outside the front door is where the Tower Doctor lives. We have medical cover here because we're locked in every night, midnight, just to stay in, nobody clinic, no sleep. If the Tower Doctor cannot fix us, he pops us next door to Roger, the Padre. Who buries us in the Chapel Royal. Very into a bed chamber that has nothing in it, it's empty, it's an empty room. As soon as you go into that empty room, you'll trigger a projection. On the walls, will show a video. Those walls will then start to talk to you about the whispers, the rumours, the secrets, what could have happened. The two boy princes allegedly murdered in that bedchamber in 1483. That is a story for you to investigate and for us to tell you what could have happened. Moving swiftly.
Le coussin, il a pas l'air très agréable.
I can understand that. Now, she was sentenced to death, but Queen Anne Boleyn was petrified of the act. She pleaded with the king that if she were to acknowledge every single charge brought against her and admit to it, could she be executed in the French manner with a double-edged sword? Henry pondered the request and said, no. He said, no, because that means I've got to go to France, collect the swordsman of Calais, bring him back to France, and I don't have time. I'm due to be married any day now to Jane Seymour, who's waiting very patiently in the palace. We need to get things moving. Even the Privy Council were not aware that the swordsman of Calais was already here, inside the royal palace 4 days before Queen Anne Boleyn had even stood trial. No matter what was going to happen, she was always going to lose her life. The real reason? She could not provide a surviving male heir to the throne of England. She was discarded. Pray. The final part of her prayer, however, she would repeat until death. The final words were these: Lord God, have pity on my miserable soul. She would repeat until death. Now, the court of Henry VIII fell silent as the swordsman of Calais made his way through the crowd and jumped on top of the platform. No sword in his possession. There were whispers and rumours that he knew the young Anne Boleyn from her 5 days at French court. Rufus Worksham, he did know her, and he knew how petrified she was. To not add to any more anxiety, the swordsman of Calais had already hidden his sword in the bed of straw where he knew the Queen would be on bended knee and prayed to God. Without haste, he jumped on top of the platform in front of the Queen and his bag. He then called out, "Boy, bring me my sword." That caught the Queen's attention. Still at prayer, she lifted her head and looked where the voice was coming from. The gap was tiny. It was all his skilled swordsman needed. In one swift motion, he bent down, picked up the hidden sword, and the head was gone clean off. King or Queen, peasant or man, does not matter. The head must be held high to be declared a traitor. Friends, are we ready for a little bit of audience participation? There was no cheering this time. As the head was raised high in the air, the crow let out a large gasp. Women were fainting. Men were calling out in sheer shock because the Queen of England's eyes, they were wide open, searching the crowd. Her lips were still moving in prayer. So clean was the sword, the head did not realise it had been dispatched from the body for over 10 seconds. That is written in the archive. Right behind you there, where the memorial stands today, the only person to be executed where that memorial is. She very bravely walked herself from the King's house, through the entire court of Henry VIII, where she climbed the platform where the executioner and the axe were waiting. She turned and faced the entire court of King Henry VIII and declared these final words. Today, I died the Queen of England. But today I died married, rather to the man that I have only ever truly loved, Thomas Culpeper. Thomas Culpeper's in the crowd like that. I'm joking, he wasn't there. He'd already been hanged, drawn and quartered for his troubles in this awful mess. On hearing this declaration, the King was furious. So mad, he ordered the immediate execution of Catherine's lady-in-waiting, Jane, the Viscountess of Rochford. He declared her a traitor, saying she must have known what was going on, did not report it to the King. She will die a traitor too. This is where the court of Henry started to turn against him, because that young lady was, in fact, Jane Boleyn. She was the sister-in-law of Queen Anne Boleyn. It was Henry's way of trying to rid the Boleyn family name from the royal courts once and for all. Now, we once again have to fast forward into our history. The year 1876, the reign of Queen Victoria. Chapel Royal was a mass, unmarked, traitors' reign. Now, of the 1700 that were found, only 33 could be identified. Queen Victoria ordered that a brass memorial plaque were to be placed at the rear of the chapel by the door so that we could remember these extraordinary men and women of our history that changed the course of our history. For good or bad, it does not matter. Their stories must be told. And that is why they were buried in a chapel royal where you could not go, their friends or family could not go. The only people in those days allowed in that church was the King, the Queen, a very few select members of the Privy Council and the bodyguard. They knew that they were there. The whole point they were buried in there was to silence their stories. You could not make these men and women martyrs. Their stories were forgotten. As family members, you could not lay flowers or even say a prayer. So you forgot about these family members. Queen Victoria said absolutely no way, not on my watch. And that is why only 33 were identified because of jewellery items that were found on them. Namely, signet rings on their little fingers that had their coat of arms, because that is how they would seal wax envelopes. So when they were... So, military service, the rank. You also got to have a medal. You'll notice that on our chest we all wear the ribbons of our personal medals. So my medals are for the top two of Bosnia and Kosovo, then Iraq, Afghanistan, ISAF, then 3 Jubilee medals for the late great Queen Elizabeth II. I was very proud and honoured to serve our Queen in uniform during her Gold, Diamond and Platinum Jubilee celebration. Sunday to the King's coronation. I formed part of the bodyguard during the coronation, where we processed the King back from Westminster Abbey to Buckingham Palace and guarding the gold coach. Then the purple ribbon at the end is two things. It tells you what service you were in, and it tells you that this is the medal you've got to have to be a yeoman. Purple and white means it's the army. Navy blue with a white stripe is the Royal Navy Royal Marines. And if it's half purple, half blue, that is for the Royal Air Force. This medal, my friends, is the long service and good conduct medal, but do not be fooled by those words. That medal is awarded for 15 years of undetected crime. I was naughty, but I always said sorry. So kids, you're fine. Right, my friends, I hope you've learned a little bit of history enough to explore this wonderful Royal Palace.